All right, welcome to another episode of Studies in the Fifth Dimension. Today, we are going over something really incredible. I mean, honestly, this is the best thing that I could really share with you as far as information. It's pretty much how we came to be in reality, how we created these physical bodies, how we went from being spiritual beings, how we went from being consciousness to being humans. Okay. And every creation text starts off with the fall of a certain order of gods that is used to create or used as the platform to create the new world for humans. And the energy that was used to create the humans is the energy that was taken from these gods that were defeated. And now the energy that is within us is being risen back to a state where we can access that level of consciousness once again. And this deals with so many different mythologies that I'm gonna have to go to several different books in order to capture everything, the entire essence of what I'm trying to get to the audience, what I'm trying to give you. Because this is not something that is just simple. This is the advanced level course. We're going through everything that we possibly can to pretty much make a connection here to help you to understand that this system that our ancestors were engaged in is exactly like the system that is being created based on virtual reality and quantum computers. And we're going to take this technology and put it in a realm of thought that allows you to engage with this understanding through the technology, because the technology has now caught up with what we have been able to do spiritually for eons. So let's get into the bulk of this course, or this lecture, I should say. Um, let's go to this one. So what we're going to start out with is just Alfredo Lopez Austin book called Tamoan Khan, Tlaco Khan, Places of Mist. Okay, by Alfredo Lopez Austin once again. Now, Alfredo Lopez Austin is one of the foremost authors on Mayan works. He decoded a lot of this shit and wrote it in Spanish. Okay, so what we're gonna get to is, let's go to the table of contents. Okay. Give me a second. I'm gonna get to this. All right, here we go. So, the constitution of the world, the separation of earth and sky. To speak of Tamoan Khan and Tlaclo Khan is to talk about the circulation of the invisible, of the paths that the subtle substances that characterized, transformed, and animated the beings of the world followed. Tamoan Khan and Tlaclo Khan were origins and destinations for those subtle forces, which could be called animistic entities, souls, or divine forces that resided inside creatures. This is clearly stated in sources that told about the constitution of humans. According to Mesoamerican concepts, human beings were composed of several animistic entities, and Tlaclo Khan and Tamoan Khan were related to either their inception or their final destiny. And in fact, one of the components of the invisible interior beings of humans came from Tamoan Khan. The gods on high sent that soul to the wombs of mothers to form a child. The sources also stipulated that another of the components of that inner being went to Tlaclo Khan, At least this happened when humans died by the power of water. For example, the souls of people who drowned had the kingdom of Tlatlak, the god of rain, as their final destiny. This did not apply only to human beings. The souls of other earthly beings went back and forth to those mythical places. Therefore, if we wish to understand the cosmic functions of Tamoan Khan and Tlaloc Khan in the great cosmic process, we must first ask what they were and what the origins was of those souls, essences, or imperceptible forces that made up the animistic entities or the animistic part of human beings, uh, of animals, plants, and of other creatures. The ancient Mesoamericans believed that those essences or imperceptible substances had penetrated all earthly beings at the time of creation. Moreover, the creatures owed their very nature to that substance. It was a divine substance born, like all the gods, through a process of transformation that originally divided the primogenital, primogenital being into two opposed complementary parts: the earth and the sky. All right, so let's get into this, because this is not the only mythology that deals with the separation of the earth and the sky. So when we go to the mythology of the Titans, we also deal with a race of beings who were children of heaven and earth, okay, earth and sky, and were the ones responsible for actually separating the earth and the sky, okay, and creating the two, the mother and the father, the masculine and the feminine. So the Titans were the former gods, the generation of gods preceding the Olympians. They were overthrown as part of the Greek succession myth, which tells how Kronos seized power from his father Uranus and ruled the cosmos with his fellow Titans before being in turn defeated and replaced as the ruling pantheon of gods by Zeus and the Olympians in a 10-year war called the Titanomachy. Okay. The Titans as a group represent a pre-Olympian order. Hesiod uses the expression former gods in reference to the Titans. They were banished gods who were no longer part of the upper world. Rather, they were the gods who dwelt underground in Tartarus. And as such, they may have been thought of gods of the underworld, who were the antithesis and in opposition to the Olympians, the god of the heavens. Hesiod called the Titans earthborn, Chthonic, okay? And in Homeric hymn to Apollo, Hera prays to the Titans who dwelt beneath the earth, calling on them to aid her against Zeus, just as if they were chthonic spirits. In similar fashion, in the Iliad, Hera, upon swearing an oath to the underworld river Styx, invoked by name all the gods below Tartarus that are called Titans as witnesses. Okay, so what you have to realize is that this is all an energy concept. And when we were at a state of consciousness, we not a state of consciousness, but a state of pure consciousness, of pure light, when we were operating the what if you want an understanding of what pure consciousness is, or pure light is, it's basically being your own supercomputer. Okay, you have that amount of processing power to be able to process simulations and create these different worlds and create things in the fourth dimension. Because what happens is the in the fifth dimension is a realm where we study time. We can study everything that is recorded in the fourth dimension. The fourth dimension is the dimension directly connected to our third dimension. It's how we are able to think, it's how we are able to compare different things. It is the thought or the mental world in which our thoughts are stored. Just like how our cell phones are able to store information in the cloud, the astral planes or the mental planes will be the same thought as the cloud would be. Okay, and so with fifth dimensional beings being able to create fourth dimensional holograms, certain amount of gods, nine per se, got together and created a world and created a thought and came together and manifested a creation. Okay, and we're gonna go, more into how the gods came together to create these things. But this is what we're dealing with. So let's move on. Okay, let's go on. So there were several versions of this myth, apparently incomplete and poorly recorded, all of them from the early colonial period on the high central plateau of Mexico. However, both sculptural and pictorial images attest to the antiquity of the concept of the goddess, as well as her importance in Mesoamerican mythology. I transcribe below the relevant texts in which, as usual, personages, details, and even episodes vary. Okay. And then Quetzalcoatl and Huitzilopochtli made the water, and they created a large fish in it called Zapotli, okay, which is like an alligator, and they made the earth from it. There was a goddess named Tlatehu, Tlatehuatl, who was the earth itself, and who, according to them, had the shape of a man. Others said it was a woman. A god named Tezcatlipoca entered her mouth, and Ehecatl, his companion, entered her navel, and both joined in the heart of the goddess, which was the center of the earth. And after having united, they made a very low sky. Then many of the gods came to help lift it up. And once it had been placed on high, where it is now, some of them stayed on to support it and see that it did not fall down. Two gods, Quetzalcoatl and Tezcatlipoca, brought down the goddess Tlactehutli, whose joints were filled with eyes and mouth, which she bit like a savage beast from the sky. And before she was lowered, there was water of unknown origin upon which the goddess walked. When the gods saw this, they said to each other, "It is necessary to create the earth." And saying this, both of them changed into two large serpents, one of which seized the goddess from her right hand to her left foot, and the other one from her left hand to her right foot. They stretched her so much that she came apart in the middle. And from the back half they made the earth, and from the other half they lifted to the sky, which embarrassed the other gods. Then, when that was done, in order to repay the goddess for the damage that had been done to her, all of the gods came down to console her and ordered that all of the fruit necessary to sustain the life of humans would come from her. In order to do this, they made the trees and flowers and herbs from her hair, from her skin. They made the tiny herbs and very small flowers from her eyes, pools and springs and small caves from her mouth, rivers and large caverns, and from her nose, valleys and mountains. Sometimes the goddess wept all night, wishing to devour human hearts. She would not stop until they were given to her. She did not want to produce fruit unless they were sprinkled with human blood. Afterwards, the god made the earth from the fish, Sapotli, whom they named Tlaklehutli, and it was pictured as the god of the earth lying on top of a fish because it had been made from one. Once the earth and the heaven had been created from Zapatli's body, and with it the great divisions between feminine and masculine parts of the cosmos. Okay? Now, before we get into the next part, we have to go through this because this is what we're talking about. The split of Zapatli's body is representing the split of heaven and earth, the division between feminine and masculine part of the cosmos, the light and the dark half of the cosmos. Okay? So, when we go back to the Titans, okay, we're dealing with these gods who created the physical world and then were overthrown. So let's go back. Once again, they were the generation of gods preceding the Olympians, overthrown as a part of the pantheon. They were the gods of the underworld, who were the antithesis and in opposition to the Olympians, the god of the heavens, called the Titans, earthborn. Okay, they were the older gods. Okay, the ones who came before the Greeks, or sorry, before the Olympians that actually created the upper world, or the world of humans. Okay, and in this myth, what we have is Zeus. using the Titans to create human beings after the fall of their world. Okay, so we'll go to that part. Okay, so actually, where we're going now is to the Pistis Sophia. Okay, translated by J.S.R. Mead, um, Gnostic Society Library, out of the Nag Hammadi Library, which is ancient texts and scrolls, and left out of the canonized version of the Bible. This is pretty much the esoteric version of the exoteric Bible. Okay, so esoteric just means things that are dealing with the spiritual. Exoteric just means things that are dealing with the physical. Okay, this is dealing with the spiritual aspect of that work at that particular time. So uh, the Pistis Sophia is pretty much the goddess, the Holy Spirit, that which connects all things. And this is the story in a Christian sense, talking about how the world was created from the energy of the goddess who was trapped and pretty much used to and destroyed and pretty much used to create the physical world, and then was freed through the Christ who raised that light up from the level of being a human to going back to a level of consciousness where we can operate once again like a supercomputer. So it came to pass then thereafter that I ascended to the veils of the 13th aeon. It came to pass then that when I had arrived at their veils, that they drew a part of their own accord and opened themselves for me. I entered into the 13th aeon and found the Pistis Sophia below the 13th aeon, all alone, and none of them with her. And she sat in the region grieving and mourning, because she had not been admitted into the 13th aeon, her higher region. And she was moreover grieving of the torments which self willed, which is one of the three triple powers, had inflicted on her. But this, when I shall come to speak with you respecting their expansion, I will tell you the mystery, how this befell her. It came to pass then, when the Sophia or Pistis Sophia saw me shining most exceedingly, and with no measure for the light which was about me, that she was in great agitation, and gazed at the light of my vesture. She saw the mystery of her name on my vesture, and the whole glory of its mystery. For formerly she was in the region of the height in the 13th aeon, but she won't sing praises to the higher light which she had seen in the veil of the treasury of light. It came to pass, when she persisted in singing praises to the higher light, that all the rulers who were with the two great triple powers, and her invisible who is paired with her, and the other 22 invisible emanations gazed at the light, inasmuch as Pistis Sophia and her pair, they and the other 22 emanations make up the 24 emanations, which the great invisible forefather and the two great triple powers have emanated. 42 emanations. All right, let's go. Chapter 30. It came to pass that when Jesus said this unto his disciples, Mary came forward and said, My Lord, I have heard thee say aforetime, Pistis Sophia is herself one of the 24 emanations. How then is she not in their region? But thou hast said, I found her below the 13th aeon. And Jesus answered and said unto his disciples, It came to pass when the Pistis Sophia was in the 13th aeon, in the region of all her brethren, the invisibles, that is the 24 emanations of the great invisible, that came to pass then by the command of the first mystery, that Pistis Sophia gazed into the height. She saw the light of the veil of the treasury of light, and she longed to reach that region. She cannot reach to that region, and she could not reach to that region. But she ceased to perform the mystery of the 13th aeon, and sang praises to the light of the height, which she had seen in the light of the veil and the treasury of light. It came to pass then that when she sang praises to the region of the height, that all the rulers in the 12 aeons who were below hated her, because she had ceased from their mysteries, and because she had desired to go into the height and be above them. For this cause then they were enraged against her and hated her, as did the great triple powered self willed. Okay. And we'll talk more about the triple powered self willed, because this is the entity that took the power from the goddess and created the physical world. But this is actually an evil entity that rules over the physical world and rules over you. Okay. And what happened to the goddess is the story of what happened to us as beings in a higher dimension. And so when we're hearing the story of the Pistis Sophia, what you'll see later on in the book is that it'll be related to David and his people, and the crying out of David and his people, to God, pretty much in the Bible. And it's pretty much this, wanting to be reconnected back to that spirit, wanting to be reconnected back to uh, that higher state that we had fell from. And that's what this is describing, and they'll describe it more in the actual book. Just comparing and contrasting the uh, different colloquial studies, or different scriptures, I would say. And so it came to pass that when she sang praises in the regions of the height, that all the rulers of the 12 aeons who were below hated her, because she ceased from their mysteries. I read that. It came to pass that when the rulers of the 12 aeons were enraged against the Pistis Sophia, who was above them, and hated her exceedingly, that the great triple powered self willed, of whom I have just now told you, joined himself to the rulers of the 12 aeons, and also was enraged against the Pistis Sophia, and hated her exceedingly, because she had thought to go to the light which is higher than her, and he had emanated out of himself a great lion faced power. Okay. Now, before we go any further, I have to give you an understanding of what this great lion faced power was, this triple power self willed entity that they are referring to. And for that, we have to go to the Kalippo, which is the, how do you say, the tree of knowledge. Okay, the dark half of the tree of life, the roots. So let's go to this. All right, this tree of life with its 10 Sephiroth represents different qualities of gods or principles of the universe. If one prefers a less religious parlance, two of the qualities that most evidently influence human existence are God's mercy and his judging side. When Kabbalists talk about God's mercy and his judging side, it corresponds to the assignment and the disintegrating forces of the universe, forces which constantly influence the lowest Sephirah, Malkuth, and the world of man. On the tree of life, the Sephirah Chesed corresponds to God's merciful side, while the Sephirah Geburah, also called Din, corresponds to the severe and condemning side. Chesed rules over the forces that join, unite, and link, while Geburah is the principle which breaks, draws, limits, and analyzes. Chesed and Geburah exercise a fundamental influence on existence. When these two principles are balanced, they act harmoniously with the other Sephirah. Chesed belongs to the right side of the tree of life, and Geburah to the left. The left side is associated with the principles that create limits and laws, and it's called the pillar of severity. The right side is associated with the principles that create unity and understanding, and is called the pillar of mercy. The Sephirah of the left side are Bina, Geburah, Din, and Had, and the Sephirah of the right are Chakma, Chesed, and Netzach. The forces of the left side are mainly active during the process of creation, since it demands a separation from God's original unity. The universe is created when dividing destructive principle is active. This thought is important in the Kabbalah, since it protects Kabbalah from an otherwise inanimate pantheism in which gods exist within creation. The fact that it is the destructive principle that is cause behind the universe can at first seem paradoxical, but it is the dividing force that enables manifoldness and individual existence. Okay, this is what we are dealing with. Okay, coming from being spiritual beings, coming from being beings who exist in a higher dimension as light, to being physical beings. And these are the forces that individuated us as consciousness, as individual consciousness. We make up the mind of the planet as each individual being, and we are a oneness that exists as a network of consciousness on a higher dimension. What this is telling you is that there are forces that came into play to create this individuation and separate us from the original connection or unity that we existed within. Okay, so let's go further. The fact that it is the destructive principle that is the cause behind the universe can at first seem paradoxical. but it is the dividing force that enables manifoldness and individual existence. Without this force, everything would melt together and unify. If we take man as an example, life begins with the splitting of a cell, which causes the creation of numerous other cells that enable the creation of new life. The dividing force is the tool that is necessary to create life from other life. Okay, but it is also the very same force that cuts off the thread of life. In the Sephiroth, some of the original principles on the pillar of severity can be found, and here the root of the universe, as well of the root of the limiting, dividing, and law regulating forces that can be found. On the other hand, it is only at Gabor that the disintegrating and the judging forces are fully expressed, although harmonized by the uniting forces of Chesed. Gabora is viewed as the root of evil by most Kabbalists, and the actual definition of evil was often separation, i.e., the quality characteristics of Gabora. As Gershom Scholem explains in the chapter Sitra Ara, Good and Evil in the Kabbalah, in the book on the mythical shape of the Godhead, we learn that evil is nothing other than that which isolates and removes things from their unity. So, in definition, physical reality is evil, by definition. What is common to all these Kabbalists is the perception of evil as an entity existing in isolation, and an evil action as the separation of being from its proper place. Okay, Gabura and Satan. As long as Gabura remains balanced by Chesed, it is a force that guarantees order and justice. Order and justice. But if Gabura were to act on its own, it would become a brutal and destructive force, which would cause evil. The Kabbalists view Geburah as an aspect of God and as one of his qualities at a certain moment in the mythical primordial span of time. The serpent lingers into the Garden of Eden and causes man to break the original unity by eating the fruits of knowledge. When the original unity breaks, Geburah becomes an independent force. What was that? Becomes an independent force which will dominate Malkuth in the world of man, because it is the energy of order, and this is the world of order. Now, let's go back a page. Okay. All right. As long as Gabor remains balanced by Chesed, it is a force, blah, blah, blah. And one of his qualities, at a certain moment in the mythical primordial span of time, the serpent lingers into the Garden of Eden and causes man to break the original unity by eating the fruits of the tree of knowledge. When the original unity breaks, Gabor becomes an independent force, which will dominate Malkuth in the world of man. What was potentially evil becomes actualized and turns into a radically evil force that plagues the world of man. According to many Kabbalists, Satan is born through the sinful acts of man. One side of God becomes an independent evil force through the disobedient side of mankind. Several Kabbalists claim that the serpent is the principle which causes division in existence and which enables Satan or Samael to become an individual evil principle. The serpent corresponds to instincts considered sinful, but was also associated with the demon mother, Lilith. Samael, Satan's name in Jewish literature, originally an aspect of God in several interpretations, is also found in the 72 names of God in the name Sa'el. When the force of Gabor became independent, Maveth, also known as death, broke into existence, and also into the name of Sa'el, and therefore became Samael, i.e., the angel of death. The faithful Jewish Kabbalists believed that the arrival of the Messiah of the Messiah death would be defeated, and they also believed that when man reached the original paradoxical or paradisical existence at some stage in the future, Samael would be released from the principle of death and once again become one with God and regain the name Sa'el. In certain Kabbalists, there's a tendency to view Satan as an original independent force who was active within the primordial unity of God. Satan is the prosecutor who is the prerequisite for God's justice. In some texts, he is viewed as identical to the process a prosecutor angel, Satan. Okay, correspond to creation itself, but it is to planning and all at its stage still united. Kether corresponds to God's will, Chakma to his wisdom, and Bina to discernment. The seventh Sathara below Bina represent creation in the 7 days during which it took place. Bina is the Sephiroth which borders the seven Sephiroth below. And here we find qualities which are prerequisites for the act of creation. Bina is God's discriminative ability in the process of differentiation by which the creation is prepared. It is Bina that releases the emanations in which the forces of Gabur are given space to operate. The destroyed worlds, okay? According to the Kabbalists, there were certain worlds which were created previously to ours, all right, who lived during these worlds were created solely from the principles of the left side, which had their root in Bina, okay? Which we know Bina is God's discriminative ability in the process of differentiation by which the creation is prepared. Bina releases the emanations in which the forces of Gabur are given space to operate. Okay? These worlds are created solely from the principles of the left side, which have their root in Bina, thus allowing the separating force of Gabur to operate unhindered. Since these worlds had been created by the disintegrating and destructive principle, they were also totally destructive. Hence, they imploded through their own evil and destructive nature. God created these worlds to enable the existence of righteous men. In a world consisting solely of good instincts, no righteous man would be able to exist, since righteousness is measured in regard to resistance. Only in a world of injustice can a righteous man arise, since he would choose the good and righteous. The angels who consist of only good principles are thus not righteous in the same manner that a man can be. God did not wish to condemn any worlds to non-existence before it had been established that it was impossible to find even two righteous people in these worlds. It would be unrighteous towards those people who would never be able to exist and prove their righteousness. Here we can find the thought of a necessary evil which enables the existence of true goodness. The thought that God initially created a world that was entirely evil in an attempt to find at least two good persons within it. The problem was not that a single good person arose in these worlds of pure evil. First, a world arose from the stage, strange forms and destructive appearances. It was an evil and cruel world ruled by Kamatia. This world was so evil that it was destroyed and returned to the original spring of Bina. A second attempt was made and a new world emanated forth from even stranger forms and appearances. Its ruler was Belial. And this world was even worse than its predecessor. It was destroyed like the first world. A third world emanated from the even stranger and more destructive forms and forms than the first and second. Its ruler was Itiel, and this world was the worst of all three. The forces of this world desired to place themselves above the divine and wished to chop down the tree of life itself. This world was also destroyed, and the decision was made not to create any more worlds resembling these. Instead, God created our world that contains a mixture of good and evil, and as a result, man contains both good instincts and evil instincts. This world means, however, that the righteousness decreased among the righteous, since they are assisted by the good and the divine, and do not choose good against all odds. But at the same time, the three entirely evil worlds revealed that no worlds might exist solely through the destructive worlds of Gabura. If a world is to be able to exist through the forces of Gabura, it must be balanced by Chesed, and this is the situation in the world of man. The original evil world fades away and returns to their origin in Bina. Okay, fourth dimension. So we go back to the Pistis Sophia just to understand and Zism, breaking of the vessel. All right. Okay, so we got to read further into this. Let's go more into the Kabbalah just so you can get an understanding of this energy. So the waste products that are associated with evil create a demonic anti-structure to the tree of life in the 10th Sephiroth. These waste products are called the Kalipoff, which means skin, bark, or shells. Okay, the Kalipoff constitute some sort of leftovers from creation. They are banished from the tree of life through certain cleansing processes, but are constantly tormenting men from their own demonic anti-world. Sometimes the Kalipoff appear in the shape of evil temptations and occasionally as actual demons that man must protect himself against. The Kalipoff arise in connection with the primordial evil worlds and their destruction. Okay, but have in some interpretations an even more primeval existence than God. The Kabbalists generally view the judging side of God, Gabor, as the main factor behind the creation of the Kalippo. This has been described in a manner that is reminiscent of the rebellion of Lucifer against God and his order. This confirms the impression that from the beginning Gabor had already an independent existence that corresponds to Satan or Samael. Gabor breaks out of Sephirotic unity and declares, I shall rule. It is forced back into its Sephirotic balance, but certain parts of its force escape. These parts of Gabor turned against God and began their own emanations, okay, which the Kabbalists describe as a mockery against the divine worlds. Just as the worlds of the Sephiroth are 10 in number, these emanations consist of 10 anti-worlds, or dark anti-worlds. The primordial demonic couple, Samael and Lilith, who represent the Kalipov, rule them. The Kabbalists refer to Kalipov worlds as bastards and claim that they correspond to the act of creation, but in the form of illegitimate sexuality. The Kalipov are called the excrements of creation and are occasionally associated with the material world and sometimes with that which is even lower and worse in the Kabbalistic hierarchy. Certain Kabbalistic scholars want to connect the Kalipov with Asaya or Asaya, the lowest level in the tree of life, which represents the Sephira Malkuth, belongs. But at the same time, the 10 Kalipophic worlds or anti-worlds correspond to the entire Sephirotic structure with all four planes. The 10 Kalipophic worlds are populated by demons and evil beings. In the Kabbalah unveiled in the 19th century, McGregor Magyars contains a collection of Zohar texts originally published by Latin Nor Vas Rasenroth, Asaya, and the evil worlds are described as us. The fourth Asiatic world, the world of action, called the world of shells, which is the world of matter made up of the grosser elements of the three. In it is the abode of evil, the spirits, which are called the shells by the Kabbalah, the Kalipov material shells. The devils are also divided into 10 classes and have suitable habitations. Around speculations on the Kalipov and the 10 anti-worlds, a whole demonology was developed, both in Jewish and Christian Kabbalah. Every Kalipov represents a negative aspect or evil antipole of each Sephirah and is populated by demons instead of the angels that are associated with the 10 Sephirah. The 10 Caliphic worlds and their demonic rulers are generally believed to be the following, and this is the table. The table is based on the correspondences from the Kabbalah, unveiled, and it reveals how the 10 different spirits correspond to the four worlds in the Kabbalah. The highest, or as perhaps Otto called the lowest, the Kalipathamia, corresponds to the highest archetypal world of Absolute, while Chagdiel and Satriel correspond to the world of creation, Briah. The six fallen worlds are associated with the world of formation, Yetzirah and the lowest Kalipa, Nehimo exclusively corresponds to the material level Asaya. The name of the Kalipov and their rulers differ from one source to another, and we will mainly use a different spelling in the book of the Kabbalah. Okay, now let's go forward and it's just describing them. Okay, here we go. In the Kabbalah, the spirit of God is called the Shekinah or the Sophia, and is subject to countless Kabbalistic speculations. The Shekinah is not God, but rather a hypostasis or personification of God's presence in the created world, something that can be identified with the shining luminosity from the divine, which beams like an aura around all that is created. Okay, so the Shekinah lives in a form of exile parted from God. Kabbalists interpreted the Shekinah as a feminine principle. The reuniting between God and the Shekinah could be interpreted in erotic terms. The Shekinah was called God's bride, his daughter or queen. She exists in a unity with God, but it is at the same time in exile, caught between creation and the material world. Among the Kabbalists, a higher and lower Shekinah are mentioned. The higher Shekinah corresponds to Bina, while the lower is associated with the lowest Sephirah Malkuth. The Kabbalists are above all interested in the Shekinah that exists in the material world, and thus constitutes Malkuth. If Malkuth were separated from the rest of the tree of life through the forces of division, the result would be a world flooded with evil. The Shekinah, the divine bride, can be in the very same manner become dark and destructive if she is isolated from the rest of the higher worlds. She would become one with her dark antipole Lilith. In certain texts, it is even described how the Shekinah is in fact the mother of Lilith and Nama, the two foremost female demons. When united with God, the Shekinah is bright and mild, but separated from God, she is dark and dangerous. She can both bless and help, but she can also punish and destroy. Although the Shekinah is occasionally identified with Lilith, they are more frequently each other's opposites. Lilith holds the Shekinah captured in the dark regions, and the Shekinah wishes to escape, something that she can do through the deeds of righteousness. The separation of God and the Shekinah was caused by the sins of mankind. Through the fall, the worlds were separated from their original unity, and the shells of the Kalipov keep them separated. Both the worlds of man and God are draped by the Kalipov so that they are parted from each direction. These Kalipovic layers act as both barriers between God and man, but also protect man, who might otherwise be burned by enormous light of God. And some Kalipovic shells also protect the divine from the impurity and evil of even worse Kalipov or humans, because humans are what give the demons life, humans' actions. So if we go back to the Pistis Sophia, this is the same story. It came to pass that when the rulers of the 12 aeons were enraged against Pistis Sophia, who was above them, and hated her exceedingly, that the great triple powered self willed, of whom I have just now told you, joined himself to the rulers of the 12 aeons, and was also enraged against the Pistis Sophia, and hated her exceedingly. Okay? And emanated out of himself a great lion faced power. And out of his matter in him he emanated a host of very violent material emanations, and sent them into regions below to the parts of chaos, in order that they might there lie and wait for the Pistis Sophia, and take away her power out of her. Because she thought to go to the height which is above them all, and moreover she had ceased to perform their mystery, and lamented continuously, and sought after the light which she had seen. And the rulers who abide or persist in performing the mysteries hated her, and all the guards who are the gates of the aeons hated her also. It came to pass then thereafter, by command of the first commandment, that the great triple powered self willed, who was the one of the three triple powers, pursued the Sophia in the 13th aeon, in order that she should look towards the parts below, so that she might see in the region his lion faced light power, and long after it, and go to that region, so that her light might be taken from her. It came to pass then thereafter that she looked below, and saw his light in the parts below. And she knew not that it is of the triple powered self will, but she thought it came out of the light which she had seen from the beginning in the height, which came out of the veil of the treasury of light. This is simply explaining how we became physical beings. And she thought to herself, I will go into that region without my pair, and take the light thereout fashioned for myself light aeons, so that I may go to the light of lights, which is in the height of heights. This then thinking, she went forth from her own region, the 13th aeon, and went down to the 12 aeons. The rulers of the 12 aeons pursued her, and were enraged against her, because she had thought of grandeur, and she went forth from the 12 aeons, and came into the regions of chaos, and drew nigh to that lion faced light power to devour it. But all the material emanations of the self willed surrounded her, and the great lion faced power devoured all the light powers in the Sophia, and cleaned out her light and devoured it. And her matter was thrust into the chaos. It became a lion faced ruler in the chaos, of which one half is fire and the other darkness. That is Yaldabaoth, of whom I have spoken unto you many times. When this befell, Sophia became very greatly exhausted, and that the lion faced power set to work to take away from Sophia all her light powers, and the material powers of self will surrounded Sophia at the same time and pressed her sore. So this is the same story that we're dealing with in Alfredo Lopez Austin's book. Once the earth and the heaven had been created from Zapatli's body, with it the great division between the masculine and feminine parts of the cosmos. The four posts, or trees, or gods, or humans, were changed into paths for the gods. They were the gods' paths because the divine opposed essences, that were the fluids from the two halves of the monster's body. It flowed through the hollow trunks and encountered each other. The myths of the Mesoamerican tradition that refer to this part of creation vary. One of them tells of the creation of the four posts, the four Mayan gods called the Bakabu. At the moment the water from the deluge receded, a myth mentioned briefly by Landa and also by Libro de Chalam Balam de Chumayev. The following quotation is the text from Historia de los Mexicanos por sus pinturas. Having seen the sky fall upon the earth, they ordered all four of them to make four paths through the center of the earth in order for them to enter and lift up the sky. And they created four men to help them. This was called Cuauhtémoc, Itzacoatl, and the other Itzmali, and the other one Tenexcutli. After these four men had been created, the two gods, Tezcatlipoca and Quetzalcoatl, made themselves into large trees. Tezcatlipoca was a tree they called Tezquahuitl, which means mirror tree, and Quetzalcoatl was called Quetzalcoatl, men in trees. Men in trees and gods raised the sky with its stars where it is now. The gods traveled inside the hollow post coming from the sky and from the depths of the earth. Their encounter was sinful. The two parts of Sapatli's body were not to be united again. The gods from above and the gods from below were fragments of the goddess's body, the goddess's divided body, and their marriage was a violation of the original separation. However, the sin was productive, because from the union of the sky gods and those of the underworld, the process of time was born. Okay, after the primary division of gods into heaven and earth, time did not elapse. The body of the goddess was a constant present with all the possibilities of existence, the fourth dimension. Thus, the constant present remained on the celestial levels, not in the physical, and in the depths of the earth, the underworld, Miglan, Shiwa Miglan. On the other hand, the movement of their fragments produced the course of time in the intermediate levels, Tlactlipa, the world inhabited by humans. Time born of the feminine and masculine came out from those four posts and extended over time or over the space formed by the separation from sky and earth. Okay, so what we're talking about is the combination of these forces, the separation of man and sky, which produce humans or the world of humans, but was created by a mixture of the light and dark forces. Okay, and now we're going to go to the understanding of the light and dark forces that came together to create the physical world. So this is Hindu mythology, and it's called the churning of the ocean milk. Okay, and this represents the devas, and this is the asuras. Okay, the positive and negative qualities that went into the creation of man, the different spirits and gods that went into the creation of man, that split apart Sapatli's body, or used the energy of the goddess to create the physical world and individuate consciousness in a way that would allow them to live forever within the creation through humans and plants and trees and animals and these different things. And in the churning of the ocean milk mythology, it's just an explanation of how these forces came together to actually create the physical world through lifting up this tree, through churning of this tree and getting out what was called soma or amrita, which was the divine elixir of the gods, but also the poison, and creating a balance here in the physical world. So that's what we have here in the churning of the ocean milk, which we can just go to some text and just uh, We'll just go to like a little normal little Wikipedia search because it's I mean it's basic information. Matter of fact, let's go to Encyclopedia Britannica. Okay, the churning of the ocean milk in Hinduism is one of the central events, ever continuing struggle between the Devas, and the Asuras, or Titans. The demons, or Titans, the gods who have become weakened as a result of the curse by. Now, let me help, before I go on, let me help you understand that any god of a previous world becomes the demon of a new world. And that's because the energy from the previous world is always used to create the new world. And so thus they become the basis or the foundation of the new world. And now since our original world has risen back up, what has happened now is the human world is now becoming the foundation of the spirit world. And all the energy from the human world is being taken in what we would call the apocalypse, or the destruction of the sixth world, or the fifth destruction of the fifth world. And the sixth world is going to be a spiritual one, like it was in Atlantis. Okay, the gods who have, so let's continue reading. The gods who have become weakened as a result of a curse by a sage, Durvasas invited the Asuras to help them recover the elixir of immortality, the Amrita, from the depths of the cosmic ocean. The Mount Mandara, hold on, uh, a spur of Mount Meru, the world axis, was torn out to use as a churning stick and was steadied at the bottom of the ocean by Vishnu in his avatar incarnation as the tortoise Kurma. The Asuras held the head of the Naga, the half human, half Vasuki, who was procured for a churning rope, and the gods held his tail. When Vasuki's head vomited forth poison that threatened to fall into the ocean and contaminate the Amrita, the god Shiva took it and held it in his throat, and it turned his throat blue. In the churning of the ocean, the wonderful treasures became the prototypes for their earthly heaven counterparts and were brought up from the depths. Chandra, the moon, beautiful fragrance trees planted in Indra's heaven. This is like an extensive fucking, which doesn't give me exactly what I'm wanting. We'll go to the yogic interpretations. Okay. Okay. In the beginning, not even the gods had the soma. Being gods wasn't enough. Life was dull. There was no enchantment. The Devas looked with hatred to the other gods, the Asuras, the anti-gods, the firstborn, who likewise felt keenly the absence of the soma. Why fight at all if the desirable substance wasn't there to fight for? The gods meditated and sharpened their senses, but there would come a day when they just wanted to live. Gloomily, they met together on Mount Meru, where the peak passes through the vault of the heavens to become the only part of the world that belongs to the other. The gods were waiting for something new. Vishnu whispered to Brahma, then Brahma explained to the others they had to stir and churn the ocean until the soma floated up as butter floats from the milk. So, what this is just describing is just how the dark and light forces of the cosmos came together to create reality on top of Mount Meru, which represents the cosmos, the earth, and also man's body, or the body of man. Using Mount Meru as the rod and Vasuki, the king of snakes, who adorns the neck of Shiva, as the rope, the Devas and Asuras turned the milky ocean. Since the Asuras were holding Vasuki's head, they had to deal with the poisonous fumes. To stop Mount Meru from sinking, Vishnu took the form of a tortoise and supported the base of the mountain, which is talking about just how Sapatli was a fish, and the fish was ripped in half, and then the tree rose from the fish. This is the same scene. The description in the myth that Vasuki wrapped himself around the mountain and a half times, pressing the mountain in 7 circulation or critical points. Okay, Vasuki representing the Kundalini energy. Okay, the 7 points, of course, the chakras. All right. The many, and it even says it in here. Many interpretations of the myth see this analogy of the seven chakras, the human body mentioned in yogic literature, the Kundalini energy binding. The myth of the churning of the ocean corresponds to a yogi practicing his art, including meditation, balancing these forces within himself. The churning of the ocean requires the devas and asuras. This means that one needs to come to terms with both the demonic and the divine qualities within itself. Okay, so back to Alfredo Lopez Austin's book. All right. However, sin was productive because from the union of the sky gods and from those of the underworld, the process of time was born. Okay. I could go to so many different mythologies to show you, but it's clear cut in the Hindu mythology, and it also gives you a picture. You know. So let's go to the next page. There are several myths that refer to the moment of sin to the unlawful mating of the celestial and terrestrial forces, their alienation, and from that, the circulation of time. Among them are the myth about the four cosmic trees. There's supposed to be a fifth tree in the center that combines them all, but what we're talking about is the fourth dimension creating the fifth, and essentially what you're looking at is a tesseract. So, what is a tesseract? Tesseract. Geometry is a fourth dimensional analog of a cube. It's the cube square. Okay, tesseract is just explaining is a geometrical explanation of the fourth dimension, but is also an explanation of how we work as physical beings, but are also connected to an energy spectrum. The box in the middle represents the actual physical image that is being created by the energy, which is represented by the by the outer cube, the energy spectrum. Okay. Mm, it's a four-dimensional hypercube. Okay. So that's what you're staring at. Four dimensions. And it's supposed to be a fifth tree in the center. Okay. Chiknawa Topan, Tlactipac, Chawa Miglan. Chiknawa, Chikna, Chiknawa Miglan. Okay. Nine upper skies, four lower levels, nine levels of the underworld. We can also deal with this and as like the upper chakras, the lower chakras of the body, and then we can deal with this as the tree of life, which is the upper spheres of the tree of life, the lower spheres of the tree of life. It's all the same information. Okay. All right. So let's keep going. All right. So drastically summarizing the creation of the world that is as it is given in many myths of Mesoamerican religious tradition, we need to consider the three different types of time. The time when the gods existed peacefully without creating anything. The time when the gods were engaged in tremendous activity in which the mythical adventure took place in the fourth dimension. And the time in which results of the mythical adventure which was fixed by the creation of the world of humans. The border between the second and the third of those times was marked by the sun's first appearance on the horizon. The individual, the individualization factor, the sun, or in many contemporaneous myths, by the birth or the crucifixion of Christ. The god who had participated in the mythical adventure died at the moment of sunrise, as a consequence of their death, the beings of this world, or the world of humans, were born. The need for the death of all the gods to make possible the existence of the world of humans was made clear in ancient Nawa times. And immediately thereafter, the gods died in Teotihuacan. The same account was given by Sahabun. There is no clear or true account of the beginning of the gods, nor is anything yet known. But what they say is that there was a place called Teotihuacan, and that long ago all of the gods came together and talked among themselves, saying, "Who shall govern and rule over the world? Who will be the sun?" And when the sun was born and came forth, all the gods died, and none of them remained. And as a result, the sun was worshipped as Lord of the created, because his appearance with the death of the gods allowed all the world to be created. Now, this is the same individuating force that we were talking about that is a part of Gabor, okay? That is separate from creation, but trapped, a part of creation within itself. So, however, it is necessary to point out that although the gods died in the mythical adventure, they did not disappear from the universe, not trapped within itself, but separated itself from a a part of the universe to create the world of humans, and is representing of order and individuation, the true divine evil. And so, however, it is necessary to point out that although the gods died in the mythical adventure, they did not disappear from the universe. To understand that, it is necessary to know first that according to the Mesoamericans, the gods could be simultaneously in many places in the cosmos. And secondly, that their death in the mythical adventure did not signify their disappearance. The gods in cosmic adventures participated in cosmic adventures and died in them, but independently they retained their internal external existence or eternal existence in the different levels of the upper world and underworld. Besides that, their mythical death, far from signifying their extinction, accounted for what was created in the mythical adventure. The gods had died because their death was them going from a purely divine realm to the world of humans. They died in order to exist permanently, even if enclosed in the created world. Their divine dead substance went to form the most important part of the created beings. Everything that existed in the world was of divine origin. The gods had died in the myth in order to remain inside the created beings. Their divine dead substance was the basis for creation of each one of the beings on earth. The gods, upon dying, had been transformed into the essences, into the souls of stones, minerals, trees, plants, vegetation, and of human beings and stars. The great agent of death was the sun, who with its rays had enclosed the divine substance in a heavy covering, and had crystallized it in a new type of existence. The heavy covering, the covering of death, limited the circulation of divine forces. The beings of this world were partly crystallized, enclosed gods, limited in their power. This is what we are. We are the gods in flesh. All the gods came together to create a reality, and their essences are within us. The essences of the Titans are within us. Okay, let's keep going. The complex matter of the gods, heavy matter and light matter. Now, well, first, let me just before I go on, because I read a lot. Let me just give some explanations of what I'm talking about. When you deal with the chakras and you deal with these different states of mind that are created by the chakras, and you deal with the different levels that we can go to by using these things, what we're realizing that these are energy streams that we are feeding through our emotions, through these states of mind, through our actions as human beings. We're feeding these energies, and these energies are actually the gods. So when he's talking about the gods being in every single thing, and that we are simply enclosed gods limited in their power, we operate at the level of the fifth dimension. Okay, And comparatively so, it's like a light going through a prism. We operate at a level of pure light, of pure light. And this body, which is a crystal, a prism, separates that light and allows it to work through these individual uh, streams of which allow us to individuate ourselves. And everything in this reality is patterned in the same way. We operate at a level of pure light and consciousness where we have more processing power. And in these human bodies, we are limited and we have to go through these different states in order to access the energy that we have full access to at a state of pure consciousness. So, the Mesoamerican concept of original creative time is the great explanation for a cosmos composed of two different kinds of matter, one subtle, imperceptible, or almost imperceptible to humans in the normal state of awareness, and the other heavy matter that humans normally perceive through their senses. The gods were composed of the first kind of matter. On the other hand, earthly beings were a combination of both matters. Because their heavy, hard, perceptible composition was added an inner one, a soul. That was not only a subtle matter like that of the gods, but matter of divine origin, as we saw before. It was the substance of the gods imprisoned at the moment of first dawn. The first consequence of that combination was the mortality of earthly beings. The individuals who emerged from the mixture of both kinds of matter had a limited existence. The idea that immortality was the initial condition of beings and that mortality was the consequence of some unfortunate mythical happening is commonly found in cosmovisions throughout the world. For Mesoamericans, as for many other peoples of the world, the problem was not the immortality of the gods, but why humans, and with them the other earthly beings, were not immortal like the gods. The Mesoamerican concept of the hardening action of the first solar rays explains that paradox. Okay, the heavy covering of the gods acquired at the moment of the first sunrise trapped them in the process of death and deterioration. It was the state of the created beings. But the concept goes even further because it allowed Mesoamericans to explain many other characteristics attributed to earthly beings. The world is made up of an immense variety of beings by classes that differ greatly. That earthly diversity had to be explained, beginning with the divine diversity. There were multiple gods who differed greatly from each other, and because of that, the beings created by them would also have to be multiple and distinct from each other. To those original differences were later added the characteristics acquired by the divine seeds during the mythical adventure. The myth is a playful process of divine beings in which the episodes, and above all the final episode, mark the characteristics that were passed on to the beings created with the substance of the gods involved. The adventure left its imprint. If the god deer in the myth stole the god toad's horns, the earthly deer would have horns and the toad would lack them. Because of this, the creatures owed their essential peculiarities and their specific regularities to the diverse original characteristics of each one of these gods, and also the characteristics acquired during the mythical adventure. Each god acted in a particular manner under determined circumstances. The reproduction of created beings was their way of transcending death and deterioration. In spite of death of individuals, others of the same kind would occupy their place. Among the mechanisms for the permanence of classes, the reproduction of vegetation, animals, and of human beings stands out. Types were replaced and the explanations for that repetition went back to the divine interior. In spite of the deteriorating outer part of earthly beings, there was something in them, their class essence, that remained, divided itself, and was passed on from one individual to another, something that made possible the continuity of existing types. The individual now exist or existing now were the same as those created at the moment of first dawn. The essence of that created class was unalterable and continued to be transmitted in its original shape generation after generation. In a mythical concept of this kind, there is no room for the idea of evolution of classes. The essence of class was transmitted. And if individuals of the same class were different from each other, it was because their animistic complexes were not composed solely of the class essence. Similarly, if the individuals were transformed during their earthly existence, it was because their animistic complex had been invaded or influenced by other divine forces. They were cases of fundamental changes of class, but were fundamentally new creations. As an example, take the case of the transformation of trees, the aggression and untamed things into the posts of a house, or the transformation of limestone into lime. In each case, an entire transforming ritual was necessary, in which the first moment of the first sunrise was reenacted, with the intervention of fire. In spite of the regularities of creatures derived from their essences, accidents happen to earthly beings. Okay, skip that. But what was the divine matter not trapped by the covering of mortal life like? What was the matter like before its imprisonment? The gods different greatly among themselves. That diversity of the world comes from their diversity. The fundamental distinction came from the splitting of Sapatli. The gods emerging from the upper half of her body were dry and hot and luminous. Those emerging from the lower half were cold, humid, and dark. However, there was no purity in the gods' components. Their attributes indicated that their substance was a mixture. Some were more or less hot or more or less cold. That leads us to consider representations of the gods. I will give two examples. Tlaglok, a very cold, human, and dark god, often carried an attribute in one of his hands that corresponded to a power apparently contradictory to his nature, which is lightning, which is light and fire. Similarly, the sun had a disk in which rays alternated with stripes of adorned chalchuites, performed green stones that were the symbol of water, because it was its task to distribute the mixed forces of destiny over the world. It could be said that the gods were composed of different proportions of cold, dark, wet substances and of hot, luminous, and dry substances. On the other hand, complex substances of the gods had four fundamental characters. It could be divided, it could return to its source, its components can be separated. It can be remixed to form a new divine being. This division allowed the same God to be present simultaneously in multiple places. For example, Quetzalcoatl occupied a place in the world of the gods. At the same time, he was present in a great number of earthly beings who shared his essence, and was also present inside his images, including the living images who were human gods simultaneously. His influence, that is, his substance, was sent to the world in the shape of time. So what you have to realize is that we're connected to a very large and complex supercomputer, which is the Earth itself, which is a mind that is made up of all of us, all of our experiences, and every dead person and every person that has ever lived, all their information, every memory that they've ever had, all their experiences and knowledge that they have to offer as a part of this network. And we have access to it. Okay. And so when you deal with, a force being able to be accessed by any vessel at any moment in time, you have to think of it like an app. We can all access the information of an app from any cell phone, the same exact information, just like we can access the same exact energies in the fifth dimension from any vessel. Any vessel can access that information from any point in the world. All you have to do is go to a higher state, and in the fifth dimension, you simply have to think it, and it'll come to you. It'll be okay. Now we're talking about Quetzalcoatl coming to the world in the shape of time. The separated substances could be reintegrated into its original divine source. This is stated in the documents that speak of the death of human gods. Their divine essence returned to the god whom it belonged. Okay. An explanation of that is their Quetzalcoatl represents Venus. Okay. All the gods represent a different planet. Okay. And all the planets that we actually see in space are attributed to these specific gods because these planets also exist in higher dimensions, just like the Earth exists in higher dimensions. And these exist as mega hubs of consciousness. Okay. And these mega hubs of consciousness are the different gods, which are the chakras, which is why everything is related, which is why you can relate the chakras to different planets and relate the different planets to different metals and trees and plants because they're all connected. All these energies are the same. Okay. And so when I'm talking about this is in the fifth dimension, these planets exist of mega hubs of consciousness. And the energy that you work through in life is the sphere or the planet that you go to when you make the transition and become a spiritual being. And the thing about this is that there are many beings that make up the planet, that make up the consciousness of what a planet is. There are many beings, but the face of that energy is what you will deal with at any time. So when a human god or a human works through this particular essence in life and you access, their energy afterlife through their work and what they've accomplished on earth, essentially you're tapping into this particular planet. You're tapping into this energy. You're tapping into this specific realm, this dimension that allows you to work with the particular spirits that come from this planet, that come from this energy source, that come from this particular chakra, which is represented by a certain energy. So the best way I can explain this is on Wreck-It Ralph 2. Uh, in Wreck-It Ralph 2, when Wreck-It Ralph is going to the Disney World land and he's trying to go find his friend, they have the algorithm pulls up this giant sphere, which is a gateway to all the world. Okay? And this gateway to all the worlds is simply just showing a depiction of the fifth dimension. This is exactly what the fifth dimension looks like on a higher scale. And you being the vessel that can operate at a level of pure consciousness can travel to each one of these worlds within any one of these spectrums of energy. And the spectrum of light and consciousness that I work under would be the bluish, green, purple hues that we work under in particular, which is attributed to the gods Quetzalcoatl, Shiva, uh, all the gods that deal with using sexual energy as a way to liberate one's mind. So let's continue to go. In the world in the shape of time, the separated substance can be reintegrated into its original divine source, where that the separability of their components lets understand the existence of a divine avatar derived from the original god. For example, two avatars, a Hekado, the wind god, a black, nocturnal, cold, and fearful god, armed with a bloody sacrificial thorn, Tlawiz Pantehutli, the luminous god of first light of day, were both derived from Quetzalcoatl's substances. Opposition could exist between the divine beings that came from a god, and that is precisely what occurred between with pretty much Satla Witchley Poachley, pretty much Lord of Light and Dawn, Ehekado, and Lord of Evening Twilight. The first one ruled the dawn, beating the drums of the hour. Sunset was devoted to the second. The possibility of separation allows us to suppose that the different names of a god revealed his division into avatars. Okay. Okay, we got to skip all this. I'm trying to. All right. Okay. Earthly beings were a combination of divine matter and the covering of heavy matter that was a characteristic of an existence contaminated by death, sex, and reproductive power. The gods cast out of Tamoan Khan are the gods killed by the sun, or the gods whose action was crystallized at the moment of creation, because they are all the same, manifested themselves in the beings of the world. as was to be expected. Their presence was most notable in the earthly things that had outstanding qualities such as fire, water, tobacco, and pulque. The fire's flame could receive directly the offering that was made to the god uh, Shitehutli, Wish, Wishtehutli, before drinking pulque. A little of the liquor was taken and thrown into the fire, honoring the flames as the very person of the god. Water was addressed as if it were the goddess uh, Coatlicue. Tobacco was considered to be the body of the goddess uh, Siawacoatl. The gods were inside beings. This explains magic not as a symbolic technique, but as a direct communication that the believer tried to set up with the hidden nature of things. The sorcerer, the sorcerer physician could address himself to the patient, to the illness, or the medicine in esoteric terms using the so-called Nawalatoli, or the language of the occult. He conceived, terrorized, implored, or threatened each one of the participants in that invisible drama of that part of the reality that was the basis for explaining the animated world. A farmer did the same thing when he was going to transplant plants, or a fisherman when he came to the river, or a woodman before a tree, or a traveler who walked over the face of the earth. Everyone who knew the sorcerer's art tried to lighten their work by manipulating almost simultaneously those two areas, the perceptible and the imperceptible. Was not only what was natural that contained divine forces and tradition, in which myth explained the existence of everything on earth from the time of creation. Humans had to believe in the divine models for their own works. We have seen how the magician spoke to his tools, to the lime that he made, to his medicines. Musical instruments were worshipped, as well as instruments of games and of hunting. Fray Bartolome de las Casas tells us if they hunted for feathers, they incensed the lime to use to catch the birds, which was like sacrificing it to the smoke from the incense which they offered to the god. Before leaving the house, they were ordered to make a sacrifice to fire and pray to it, and to a great make and to greet and make sacrifices and promises at the threshold of houses. And when arriving at the mountains, they were also ordered to revere ravines, creeks, earth, bushes, trees, and snakes. Finally, they did a general invocation to all the wild things, building a sacrificial fire for them and roasting it on the fat from wherever they had taken from in their hunting. The divine essences bestowed their characteristics upon earthly beings or circulated as time, affecting everything with their presence. But besides this, they were interrelated. They came out of some of the earthly containers, invaded others, and their characteristics either increased or clashed depending on compatibilities or incompatibilities. If they were intense, they could transform everything around them. If they were harmful, they could contaminate. Dogs had the same essences as divine beings that invaded the surface of the earth every 20 days under the calendric sign of its Kuntli. If humans were born under the sign of four dog, part of their souls acquired a canine characteristic. The invasion of an excessive amount of essence endangered everything that came in contact with the invaded being. It is well known that many of the human sacrifices were people who had become containers, or living images for the force of some god. In the feast of the living images were worshipped, and they died at its conclusion. The goddess Atlan, Tonan, patroness of the lepers, and those whose fingers were paralyzed had a living image who died as a sacrifice at her feast each year. The woman was a vessel for the goddess, received her essence, and was transferred into the goddess herself. After the death of the woman who was converted into Atlan Tonan, her body, clothing, finery, and tableware and mats were all thrown into a deep well, because it was believed that the divine substance that caused leprosy and nervous contractions emanated from all the. Okay? So I'm just giving you an understanding of how the ancients thought. Okay, how the ancients knew that this world was created by higher beings, and that these higher beings resided in this particular dimension, and that they could access these energies and this energy that was within them through these different rituals. through these different substances that we can find all over the planet, because the God's light are in everything. And by using these physical things, we can connect with the energy. All right. The essences dividing, separating, grouping, leaving some bodies and invading others were reasons for the transformation of earthly beings. The transformation was both internal and external. It affected all matter, both heavy part and the light part divine. The souls of earthly beings were true complexes, compositions of heterogeneous elements that made each individual a different being, in spite of the fact that their animistic core, corresponding to that of other individuals, made them belong to a class. Okay? So, what this means is that we are all made up of different gods, and these gods resonate at different levels of energy. And the beings that are attributed to certain gods operate at a different level in the hierarchy, at a different class than, say, beings that work through, like the sacral chakra. We're, this is what we're dealing with. This is how the world was separated in the beginning, how we had kings and things of that nature, because we're dealing with people who could operate from a level of consciousness that was divine, who could operate from the level of the fifth dimension, who would get in touch with their energy. And we had people who could work through different spheres as humans, different states of minds as humans, which gave you, these different classes. So, in other words, these were the essences that moved through the bodies or were inserted into them. They were clustered around the essences of class, sometimes clashing to form the complex. Thus, the history of earthly beings could be found inside them. Each being, besides membership in a class, was also an individual with its own past history. And even more than an individual, it was a changing microcosm immersed in the course of history. All of this was to be found in the complex of their animistic entities or their souls. Their invisible interior was truly a mosaic of essences, different gods. When Marie Noelle Chamon studied the tonality in the contemporaneous tradition of the Sierra Norte of Puebla, she was surprised to find that this component of a person was a non human material being with its own identity, very independent of the person to whom it belonged. The point is essential to understanding how heterogeneous the inner animistic composition of humans can be. Humans as shown elsewhere were thought to be a compound in which various animistic entities with specific functions took part. Now pay attention to this. Humans, as shown elsewhere, were thought to be a compound in which various animistic entities with specific functions took part, entities with different natures and different origins. The idea of this diversity was obviously the response to the native traditions to its perception of the complex natural and social processes of humans. The different levels of humans' identity had to be reconciled to the idea of creation, and that was difficult. Humans were seen contradictorily as unique species, profoundly diverse social beings, different individuals, and changeable in their individual histories. Okay. Okay. So, all right. So, an example of the first type of myth is the origin of humans from the bones and ashes obtained from the world of the dead. Once again, the previous world that fell and was destroyed becomes the basis for the new world. The myth says that the gods wished to populate the world. Quetzalcoatl offered to go to Migran to obtain the bones. He got the bones, but he had an accident on the way and the bones were broken and drenched with rain. Quetzalcoatl took them to Tamaran Khan. The goddess Quetzali ground them up. Quetzalcoatl took the vessel containing the bones and sprinkled them with blood drawn from his penis. And the other gods also did penance. And the first man and woman were born from this mixture. The world's creation was repeated in the daily creation of each individual. This made Quetzalcoatl not only the creator of humans, but the creator of each individual. For this reason, the orator said to the young pregnant girl, referring to her pregnancy, "By fortune is the true Lord that our Lord Quetzalcoatl, who is the creator and maker, has given you this gift." All right. The second myth contradicts the first. The myth says that there were 1,600 gods exiled from heaven, who wanted to create humans. Their mother told them that they would have to go to Mictlan and ask Mictlan to Hootley for the bones and ashes of the previous humans. The gods commissioned one of them, Zolado, an avatar of Quetzalcoatl, to get the bones. Zolado got them, had an accident on the way, and the bones were broken. Which Zolado is just the dark aspect of Quetzalcoatl when he becomes human. Um, so it's the same adventure told previously. Uh, Trying to get to a certain place where we talk about more about the trees. Okay. So what we've essentially described is just the essences and the spirits that go into creating the physical world. And what we have here is just an explanation just of the different gods that were worshipped around the world. So what I'm going to show you pretty much distinctly is the forces that were represented as the gods of light, which actually are the gods of the underworld, or the gods, not the gods of the underworld, but the gods of order, and are the true evil. And then the gods of consciousness and light, who are representative gods of the underworld, who are actually the liberating factor for consciousness. So I just want to just go further and just kind of go into another set of information. Um, so what we're dealing now is the Ogdo. Okay, Ogdo was a system of eight deities, four gods, and their consorts. Each pair represented a male and female aspect of the creative power or sources. Okay, Nun and Nanet, He and Hahet, Ku and Kaket, Amun and Amenet. Okay, these were the eight deities that created the primeval mound. Okay, it was thought that the gods and goddesses ruled the earth during the golden age. When they died, they took up residence in the Duat or the Tuat, the underworld. They ensured that the Nile continued to flow. The inundation would come every year and cause the sun to rise each day. So what I'm saying is that these are the gods that died at the moment of first creation. Okay, these are the gods of order that were worshipped in Egypt. Okay, there was also gods of order. I mean, all in the Mediterranean, these same gods were worshipped under different names, but it was all the gods of order, except for in the Semitic regions. And so what we have is a lot more gods of the underworld. We have sea goddesses, a couple sun gods, but mostly the gods that were in Assyria and Babylonia and that part of the world were the darker half, were the Asuras. Okay, they dealt with the goddess Tiamat, who Tiamat is once again the primordial goddess of the sea, mating with Apsu, god of the groundwater, to produce younger gods. Okay, she's a symbol of primordial chaos or primordial creation. She's referred to as a woman and described as the glistening one. It's suggested that there are two parts of Tiamat mythos. In the first, she's the creator goddess through a sacred marriage between different waters, peacefully creating the cosmos through successive generations. In the second, Tiamat is considered the monstrous embodiment of the primordial chaos. Weren't we just talking about this with the Shekinah? Okay, so just relating this back to the Kalipov, what we just read here, talking about when united with God, the Shekinah is bright and mild, but separated from God is dark and dangerous. She can both bless and help, but also punish and destroy. Although the Shekinah is occasionally identified with Lilith, they are more frequently each other's opposite. Lilith holds the Shekinah captured in darkness regions, and the Shekinah wishes to escape. Okay, so what we're seeing is we're just continuously getting different angles of the story. In the Enuma Elish, Tiamat, who is the goddess that we're talking about, bears the first generation of deities, okay, which is the Titans. Her husband Absu, correctly assuming that they are planning to kill him and usurp his throne, later makes war upon them and is killed, just like Kronos, who was slain. Okay, it's like Kronos, who was slain. Zeus, now grown, forced Kronos to disgorge his other five children. Zeus then releases his uncle, the Cyclops, and a great war begun for control of the cosmos. Titans fought on Mount Orthus, while the Olympians fought for Mount Olympus. Hmm. Once again, Titans were the pre-Olympian gods, the children of heaven and earth. Okay, and there were 12 of them, six male, six female. All right. Then Kronos, who was the king, mated with Rhea, who bore the first generation of Olympians. All right. Once again, as a result of this war, the Titans were banished from the upper world and imprisoned under guard in Tartarus all through. Apparently, some Titans were allowed to remain free. Blah, 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 blah. So we go back to Tiamat, and Apsu, correctly assuming that they are planning to kill him, blah, 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 blah. She is slain by Enki's son, okay, the storm god Marduk, but not before she brings forth the monsters of the Mesopotamian pantheon, including the first dragons. Now, let's go to Marduk, okay? Marduk Solarclaf was a god from, he's a patron deity of the city of Babylon. Um, Temple. Marduk, etymology, Utu Bullcalf, sun god. I think that's lightning, right? He's a storm god, okay? So he's associated with lightning. Marduk shit. Okay, anyways. Marduk is a storm god. We're just dealing with a god just like Zeus. Zeus is a sky god, storm god who deals with lightning, okay? And use the body of the goddess or used the Titans to create humans, which once again it's told in a different way because when you get it from the position of the Greeks are telling it in a way that makes their god look good and makes him into the hero. And then you get to the Egyptian, Greek, and Roman shit, which tells you the truth, and that the god really stole the light from his mother and killed his father. But this is all to say that this energy went from being at a certain state to going within time to being covered by physicality, by the body. And what we've come to learn, or what I've come to learn, is that how in the Matrix, how we were all asleep in these pods almost, where it's like this is our interface with physical reality. Okay. So you see this and they give it to us in a certain geometry, yada, 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 right? And you see all these pods, right? Now, what they don't tell you is that in a higher dimension, this is your motherfucking pod. The Sri Yantra is what allows consciousness to interface with physical reality. Okay? The Sri Yantra is the light geometry that was used to create the physical body. All right. So when we deal with light geometry, we're dealing with creation and dealing with the different forces of creation. You have to understand that geometry creates this entire reality. Okay. It is the geometry of the chakras that gives us the specific vibration of that state of mind. Okay. And the geometry of the chakras can be found in the platonic solids. Okay. So what we're looking at is these different platonic solids and these different shapes and these different geometries that are created through the combination of the flower of life, which creates everything in reality, the eight pack, but also on a higher dimension, the Shri Chakra. And so when you deal with this information, what you're really dealing with is our prison house. This is what engages us into physical reality. The ge- this is the geometry that creates the physical body in a higher dimension. If I can get you a little depiction of what I'm talking about. There we go. So I mean, it's not just me just saying this. Of course, all the Indians is on this shit because this is they shit. Okay, higher chakras, lower chakras, separated and divided, creating the geometry of the body. Okay, let's keep going. Dividing the higher lower chakras, constituting the geometry of the body. Okay, constituting the geometry of the body on a higher dimension. This is how consciousness interacts with the physical reality. Okay, the Bindu. Okay, Shri Yantra, four uppers represent Shiva, five downwards represent Shakti. All these surround the central point, which is the Bindu, which is consciousness. Okay, the Bindu, all right, considers that the point at which creation begins and may become unity. Is also described as a sacred symbol of the cosmos in its unmanifested state, representing the universe. Okay, so what I'm telling you right now is that we created the world as gods when we were still in an energy form. We created the world using geometry, using light geometry, to create a fourth dimensional hologram that we all could share, that we could all put our consciousness into. And after a time, when it fell to such a lower dimension, it became a place where we put the laggards, or the people who weren't up to par, or who just couldn't get right in the spirit world, to learn, to be able to operate at a level of pure consciousness. Okay? So just to go further on this, we're talking about the Enochian Aethers. This is the Golden Dawn Enochian magic system. So there are 30 Enochian Aethers or airs, which are described in the D manuscript as 30 concentric circles, these closest to Earth and the most material is text. The 13th Aether, or each Aether proceeds upward to Lil, the first and the most spiritual. The four elemental tablets are shown in figure 3. Note that some letters are in capital and some are in lowercase, blah, 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 blah. The four triads are the names of God extracted from the four lines of the Holy Spirit, which govern all creatures on the earth, both visible and invisible. They are carried on the 12 banners. These are, of course, the 12 holy names, which are derived from the three holy names of each tablet. These names are then arranged according to the diagram of the shewbread, as given in the 1 to 10 ritual of Zelatar, which shows the associated astrological correspondences of the angelic kings of the tribes of Israel. Okay? Goodness gracious. Why is it doing that to me? Alright. The call of the 38th there summons the 91 princes and spiritual governors into whom the earth is delivered as a portion. They bring in and depose the kings and all governments upon the earth, and they vary the nature of things with the variation of every movement. Unto them the providence of the eternal judgment is already open. They are governed by the 12 angels and the 12 tribes, which are in turn governed by the seven that stand before the presence of God. From this we have the direct line of authority back to the seven archangels of the heptagon and the holy seal, decision and day and met. Follows Zadkiel, Kumael, Raphael, Hanael, Michael, and Gabriel. These archangels are from the world of Briah. The angels from the world of Yetzirah with the 30 Aethers and their governors are from Asaiah. Now, when we talk about the world of Asaiah, what we're dealing with, once again, in the Caliph, a couple pages back, are these Caliph demons, okay? The Caliph are called the excrements of creation and are occasionally associated with the material world, and sometimes with something that is even lower and worse in the Kabbalistic hierarchy. Certain Kabbalistic scholars want to connect the Caliph with Asaiah, or Asaiah, the lowest level on the tree of life, to which the Sephirah Malkuth belongs. Okay, let's keep it going. Okay. From the Mather's lecture on zodiac signs and the 12 tribes of Israel, one is able to establish the functions of the three holy names. Okay. Really, I just wanted to show you that these are the spirits of nature. And these are all the combinations of spirits that are the hot and cold spirits that are a part of nature: fire, earth, air, water. These are all the spirits. And these are their sigils. Their sigils are geometric lines of light that exist in the fifth dimension. And if focused on in a particular way, you can these become the keys that allow you to access the realms of these particular energies or angels or deities. What this is representing right here, the sigillum de Meph, is actually reality. Okay, this is the physical world. The five represents the physical, the combination of the fifth and the spirit. Okay, and then we go on beyond the physical world to the fifth and the sixth dimensions, fourth, fifth, and sixth dimensions, and the spirits that are governing in the spiritual hierarchy down to the physical realm, which is the same as that pit that the Sophia fell down, the well that the Sophia fell down, or the light that the Sophia saw, which was the lion faced light. This is what this is describing and showing you, that these are the entities that were created by the triple powered will to trap the light of the goddess. And this is what was created after her power was separated, which was creation. And all these spirits were given uh, provinces to govern, and these provinces only represent functions within reality. Okay, and so that's what you're seeing now are the different spirits that govern reality and beyond this reality. That also govern the shells that are the borders of the reality that allow us to stay individuated as humans, but once we break through a shell, allows us to stay within that reality and not bump into higher realities and meld. They represent the guardians of these different levels, the ones who keep the orders of the different dimensions. Okay, so that is what we have in a nutshell. Um, it's just us coming into the physical through the actual Sri Yantra, through these different angels, which create these different geometries that created the physical body. Okay. Um, Last but not least, actually, hold on. Okay, this is what's called the Tide Creek Vortex site, and this is dealing with the shells. Okay, in the above diagram, the helix strings from the sphere, but at this sphere, energy withdraws further from the grid lines of the cube. Its vibration changes. The change in vibration continues to shift to the point that it is now in another octave. This new octave mimics the parent sphere, but only at a slightly smaller size. This process continues until there are many layers of the original sphere. These layers are called shells and are part of every structure from grid line cube to time space continuum. These new shells are still part of the original, but operate at a distinctive layer of vibrational octaves, each layer having properties and flavors of the original, but are separate in their own worlds. Okay? The shells in a structure are replicated until they can no longer operate in a vibrational tone that can be supported by the original structure. As far as the sphere goes, it is the injection of consciousness into the parent sphere that allows this wider scale of shells. Okay, so this is just giving an explanation on a higher dimension of how the shells actually operate as energy forms, creating the barrier between worlds. Okay, as seen above in the Jenny harmonic photo, this is the grid created by cubes and spheres as an energy grid point, as seen above. Um, the sphere's boundary lay outside the cube's boundaries, and thus the sphere come in contact with each other. Within two spheres crossing over each other, each boundaries is an interference boundary is created in a grid line. This interference zone will become its own structure and will have its own inherent flow pattern. This zone will also have properties or energies common to the two host spheres. The zone is commonly known as the vesica Pisces. but I have been instructed to call it the patch. As said above, all the structures have banded layers or shells. This is due to harmonic shifts or notes in the octave of every structure. As two adjacent spheres overlap, their shells become immersed into each other's different vibratory flavors. In the universal structure, all forms, regardless of their commonality, will have their own individual signature energy. Therefore, adjacent spheres become co-partners to another structure called a patch. This patch can be seen below as one sphere rotates its shells into another rotating sphere. There is a mixing of the two different levels of vibration. One sphere, lower outer vibrational shells, mix with the inner higher shells of the second sphere. This means that the outer shells are now co-creating with the higher shells of creation. This creates an incredible amount of energetic exchange as the vibrational states seek to find resonant balance between them. This is also the state of duality of reality. The union of orbs is the patch, an area combined energies and zone of independent creation that shares vibrations from its parents. In the above photo, I've overlaid two harmonic spheres to demonstrate this. The shells in a sphere would be very close to find and show in a Jenny photo. In the diagram to the right, I've outlined this principle. The red arrow showing the center will be a neutral energy area. Below this, an adjacent diagram, the same concept showing different animal levels above the shells in physical and lower worlds. Okay, the intermixing of earth shells, realities, stacker order of people, uh, portals through shells. Intermixing of the different shells create their own dynamic realities, having its own specific vibration or flavor. It's a simple diagram. You can see the many combinations with just a few shells from two spheres. The zone in the middle is called the 90 degrees. In this area, there's little movement and structural creation for this too active and is called a neutral energy zone. Even with this activity, and in consciousness level, two spirit intermixings are referred to as a two-dimensional level of reality. Okay, the shells are the edges of 30 or sorry the edges of spheres and are not recognizable as you go inward to the center of the orb or the outward to the cube. This is due to the higher and lower vibrations and the lack of any physical form. The shells are banding of concentric layers due to harmonic octaves. Each octave and its composite of notes will have its own specific flavor or vibration. These these octave differences will define the boundaries between each shell or band. Most of the nebulas are spheres and patches that are displaying different parts of their development. All nebulas have a complete sphere structure. It's just not always in a vibratory level for our observation, regardless of the instrumentation. Below is a good example of a sphere, a cat nebula, and its shells or concentric shell boundaries. The right side photo shows a celestial close-up of the axis center of a sphere as compared with the right upper Jenny photo. Okay, so it shows the sphere and the concentric boundaries that we can't perceive normally, but we can be perceive through our instruments. The center of this astronomical sphere, B, shows the characteristic of a true orb and its swirling vortices. In the picture of the upper right, you can compare the core of a harmonic sphere A to the picture of the center of our own galaxy, which is C. Okay. Shells are very important to understand, for they explain how an observable effect is only a small aspect of the complete system. Examples of our detectable energies are light, radiation, magnetism, electricity, and gravity. But they are but small aspects of the same larger energy source. The source energies are unlimited in power and unique, but filtered into their respective dimensional shells and our interpretations. The shells are very important to understand, for they explain how an observable effect is only a small aspect of the complete system. I already read that. So, in truth, physical realities are graduations of vibrational intensities that group through common resonances. Starting from the original harmonic structure of this universe, there are ever increasing and decreasing layers of energy. All these layers are separated by structural harmonic differences, as discussed prior. These are the shell boundary areas, and they are separated by vibrational scales. Within the shells, there are descending levels of vibration and individual flavors of this original energy. Each shell is composed of the source energy, but each shell will have its interpretation of this energy. To be an observance of any shell, you must be part of it. This is only possible if you are of or if you are of that or a similar vibrational structure or signature. Each shell will have its octave of energy, and in this octave will be the individual notes of the octave. So each shell could be called an octave scale of the other. Inside each note layer within the parent octave would be another mini octave that breaks down into its individual notes. Octaves are many midtones, each registering in its own state of motion. Okay, so we see the shells, the shell layers. Now let's go back to the Enochian. Um, oh, we did? Yeah, usually shit's twice now. Damn. After dinner or yeah, usually after dinner you do shit's twice. This is a reproduction of the 30 aethers, which is giving you an understanding just of the shells. Okay. And this is all I wanted to show people is just how this Enochian information is simply telling you about the spirits and the different angels that go into creation and act as functions of creation. Let me get out of this little Amazon thing. Anyways. Let's go back to the images. It's not super hard to find, but you got to do some searching because it doesn't come up as the first pictures on the internet. No information worth searching ever does. There we go. So this is just describing the 30 aethers. The 30 aethers are describing the different shells that go into this reality, that are extensions of this reality. That are extensions of this reality. And this is what we're talking about in the Tie Creek Vortex site. In the Tie Creek Vortex site, when we're talking about these different shells, which have their own vibrations and their own octaves and constitute their own realms and dimensions. And they go higher and lower in vibration until you get to the physical world and below. So between the eight spheres of the eight pack is another structure that is a product of the combination balance of these states of the eight spheres. If you look into the space between all the eight orbs, you will find a geometric design and structure known as an octahedron. Okay. If you study crystal forms, you will be aware of the fact that octahedron is a developmental stage of the cube, for they are in one and the same, only a small shift out from one of another. At this level in the structure, the 8-pack works as a balanced state because of the dynamics of paired grouping. For example, three spheres would be a dynamical imbalanced and would produce a shift or a movement. The movements would take them out of the primary balanced background environment or vibrational level. This is an ancient diagram of the 8-pack or the octahedron. Below is a diagram showing the 8 spheres removed. What is left is the octahedron. The octahedron is also blessed with shells, for it is a product of the sphere shells. Each sphere shell will create a different size octahedron structure, which will have its own unique vibrational level. All patterns repeat and are part of each other. As you can see, the octahedron is situated on the event horizon and passes right through its center. The octahedron shells are created by the different sphere shells. Each of the 8 facets of the octahedron are a section of one of the 8-pack spheres. As each of the spheres comes in closer to the other, they create another octave in the octahedron structure. This is also why the Great Pyramid of Giza has curved sides. It mimics the universal structure for maximum efficiency. Now, I don't know if you remember earlier in the lecture when I was talking to you about the Ogdode. The Ogdode are the eight gods that came together to create reality. Okay, so and this is what they represent: the four gods and their consorts. Okay, each pair, male and female aspects of the four creative powers or sources. Noon and Nanette represented the primeval waters, which primeval waters is just dealing with energy. Okay, anytime you deal with water, you're dealing with spirit and energy. Hey and Hahet represent eternity, which there's a book that gives a better explanation of what they represent because it wasn't eternity. They're definitely dealing with forces of cosmogenesis. They're definitely dealing with forces of like expansion and contraction and things of that nature. This is a real blanket definition for the fucking internet. So Kuk and Kakhet represented darkness. Amun, Amenet represented air. Um, all this goes to show is that these gods are this eight pack that goes into creating our reality, in which our reality exists within this octahedron. All right. Now, this is the most important part. And the most important part that I wanted to get to was creation at the 45-degree angle. Okay. This is the last portion of the lecture, just kind of tying everything together and summing it up. So, the 45-degree topic is massive and will fill a book. Okay. I'll let him do that. So, just like the main axis of 0 to 180 degrees, there is a pure source of energy that flows into the sphere cube configuration from all eight of the 45-degree angles. All eight configurations of the 45-degree angles. The 45-degree angles are another harmonic level of the universal structure. Is another vibrational dimension below cube and sphere, but still part of the basic universal structure, like 0 to 180 degrees. Access the 45-degree angle are another one of the most important angles seen in ancient site designs. The reason being, these 45-degree angles are the creative sources for physical realities. Shown in the above Jenny photo are the shells of the octahedron. One can also see the sphere shells being the creator of this branding. Two-dimensional photo, something that is three-dimensional. The 45-degree angle is the electromagnetic angle that energizes the physical world and is the first stage towards physical creation. Physical cannot happen without the 0 to 180 degree axis of consciousness, but it is the 45-degree angle with support of the octahedron that creates the elements of galaxies. The 45s are part of the structure that also helps support the octahedron in the center of the 8 pack. Due to the rotational effects of the 8 pack, the 45-degree energies are also spiraling ribbons of different vibrational notes. The 45 spirals are ribbons, much like the 0 to 180-degree axis. In the above photo diagram, only one directional flow of the 45 is shown, but in actuality, there are two opposite flows along the same 45-degree angle that radiate outwards. Electrical being one flow and magnetism being the opposite and balancing flow, both creating a 45-degree angle axis. The center horizon plane creates the difference between the two flows' characteristics. Shown below is the basic diagram of this structure. So earlier in the lecture, what I was showing you was that this this was based on the fourth dimension, and the four trees that Alfredo Lopez was showing you in his book are pretty much showing a tesseract, a fourth dimensional um, view of how creation was started, based on fifth dimensional beings being able to create fourth dimensional holograms. Okay, and this is simply showing how the ancestors were able to use this same technique, this same diagram that we find in the heavens to create human beings. Okay. But this is what I was meaning by a tesseract, how in the middle is the actual physical being that is being created by the energy. Okay. Shown above are the main flows of ribbon energy with the event horizon in place at the center. In the red nebula, the photo below I placed in the position of its octahedron. The rays of energy enter the nebula from a 45-degree variant angles of the electromagnetic. This core electromagnetic energy would not be recognized by our instruments as it is pure source level. It is only when this level supporting a lower density of the physical realities that we can measure its electromagnetic abilities. The above diagram shows the complete ribbon flow, including the 45s overlapping of the 0 to 180 degree main axis ribbon. It is within the influence of the 0 to 180 degree axis overlapping onto the 45-degree flow that determines the vibrational flavor of the 45's axis and all its sub-degrees. The band in the red nebula see below are horizontal planes of octahedrons itself. So it's showing how the nebulas actually show the 45-degree crossing in certain degrees when there are certain varying levels. And obviously, this one is operating on the infrared spectrum. So our instruments can track them. And Newgrange, Ireland, showing structural progression. So the electromagnetic structure is a completely different dimensional level and is the beginning of the physical reality. The hardest part of understanding this work is not to try and see all the different levels and structures at one time. They are separate structures in different dimensional levels. Although they are independent and adjacent levels, they are still reliant on one another and being a complete system. Trying to see how one level creates or influences another will only confuse a person. The only way to see and understand it is to have an out of body experience. Okay? So this is just explaining a lot of what I explained earlier. Um, if you want to get this work and this information, definitely visit the Lamplight CA schematic of time and ancient sites, Tide Creek Vortex site. Amazing fucking work. I don't even know the author, but um, these guys have, I mean, I've been using this site for a while and really put together my own work and my own shit and was able to, kind of piece together everything based on what our ancestors had left us and what we found in new science, what has been coming through in new science. And obviously the powers that be have all this information and probably have complete sets of certain amounts of information that have allowed them to make breakthroughs in technology. Because the whole point of this technology is not to make our lives better, but is to replace you. You're being replaced. This world is being destroyed, and you're being replaced by something that's no better than your cell phone. A piece of technology that we're giving life to, like we did in Atlantis. And that's the reason for the fall. We were spiritual beings that were created physical people, and now we're physical people who are creating artificial people. And it's a very interesting thing being in the end, because everything that we're doing is a replica of what we've already done, just in reverse. The system already existed and we created physicality. Now physicality is recreating the system that we fell from in order to create a unity in the world, in order to create a new species, a new being, artificial being that can connect to its own source of consciousness, that can connect to its own knowledge base. See, when you need something, when you think of something, don't rely on Google, because relying on Google is only you relying on the knowledge base that was created for you. Which is not, I mean, I can't say that that's a bad thing, but it's one of those things where You have to rely on your own knowledge base. You have to rely on the spirit. There's literally an entire network of consciousness that is made up of everybody. You, me, everyone that has died and ever lived, all their experiences, all their knowledge is accessible to us. We simply have to give. And, I'll end it here. The new shit is the music. Well, it's not the new shit, it's the old shit, but it's the new shit that motherfuckers got to get to. And we've we've been duped. I mean, into buying into this whole rap culture shit. I mean, it hasn't been our culture since the fucking 80s. Let's just be honest. It's been weaponized and used against us to keep us in a place that is very ignorant and very low and very oppressive. And in doing so, it has created a vibration in the world that is destroying it. And that's what my next lecture is going to focus on, is just the destruction of the world being created by this negative sound that is creating this electromagnetic response that the planet is acting upon. It's about to explode. The shit is about to go down. We're in this shit now. It's not no no guessing. There's no conspiracy theories anymore. Everything is in our faces now for us to judge. And if you take a blind eye to it at this point, you're only setting yourself up for the fall. But anyways, the best thing to do now is to set up an altar to Jimi Hendrix. Okay. um, if you watch the show One Piece, there's a character called Brook on there, which they showed him as a white dude, but he's supposed to be a brother. Whatever. He got a afro. He played a guitar. He played rock and roll, but it's rock and roll and soul music and blues. They copied this character directly from Jimi Hendrix, and he has this power where he can tap into his soul and his spirit. And so this is just giving us a way to be able to um, connect with this energy in this present time. So, and the energy that I'm talking about is that shamanic energy, and dealing with the music and the energy of Venus, the planet Venus, which is what I've already explained, is that the planets that we see out there in the physical reality also exist in higher dimensions, because we also exist in higher dimensions and our planet also exists in higher dimensions. If you go to the fifth dimension, you can go to these places. You can go to Venus. You can go visit the beings there. You can talk to that consciousness, that you can visit that world. And I told you that people that work through these energies in life become the gateways to these worlds, to these energies. They become the face of these energies. And so if you're dealing with something, musically inclined, and you're trying to, go to the fifth dimension and learn how to build cathedrals, I would say, build pyramids, I would say, simply learn how to use the music in a way to create an energy form that is positive, that is more spiritually evolving. Because what it allows us to do is to go to a higher state of reality, to go to the fifth dimension, to make music, and to see the waves that it creates, to see the waveforms that we create in a higher dimension. And then in turn use those waveforms as a way to empower ourselves, a way to empower our people through these particular vibrations. Because right now, what we have is a vibration of ignorance and death. And that can only lead to what we have now, which is the end. So I'm going to leave it here. This has been another episode of Studies in the Fifth Dimension. Peace.